And joining us to discuss this very topic is Wojciech Przybylski, Editor-in-Chief from Visegrad Insight. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Good morning.
So, Orban's actions and his recent visit to Moscow might lead to questions about Hungary's reliability as a NATO ally. So how might Hungary's stance affect NATO's cohesion and collective defense strategy, to your mind?
Well, Prime Minister Orban became irrelevant in NATO. He's merely a proxy of a proxy. He's a proxy of Russia. Russia is a proxy of China. And he takes action, covered diplomatic action. He wants to take allies by surprise. It backfires tragically for him. I think politically, there is really very little to be said about the demise of the influence Mr. Orban once enjoyed.
Mm-hmm. In the European Union, Hungary currently holds the rotating presidency, and it has a veto power over some of EU's legislation. I wonder how much of a direct impact on NATO's policies Hungary really has right now.
Well, again, Hungary here is really irrelevant. We should be mindful that despite the rhetoric full of lies about peace, Hungary is investing in defense. It's building up its defense base. It is reaching already 1% of GDP in terms of production in this country, of military production, mostly military equipment connected with European industries. This is what all allies in the European Union need to do. This is also part of the conclusion of the summit, that the defense base, the industrial base needs to speed up, because we need to brace for what is coming. NATO Summit has declared that China is the main supplier of components based on which Russia conducts this war. We can call, therefore, Russia as a proxy to China. And Mr. Orban, by going to any of these countries, is just undermining himself as part of the alliance, part of the group of both EU and NATO. He acts against the common policy, and that should be rather met with silence rather than anything meaningful. Also, he doesn't have any instruments to block or to steer the European direction. So our main focus, our main strategic focus, both in the EU and NATO, need to be on production of arms, or production of ammunition, production that allows Ukraine to win when we support it with those, but also allows our opponents, adversaries, enemies to be deterred, not to treat our diplomacy lightly, but know that we are backed up by our production capacity.
And now you mentioned that Viktor Orban does not have many instruments up his sleeve. So looking at the situation, how do you think he can afford now to discard whether now Western countries or now Russia or China? He's trying to have this kind of a balancing act in between, but for how long really can he maintain this balancing act until, let's say, to put it lightly, now, for instance, Western world will be fed up with the fact that now Viktor Orban is operating in that way?
Well, again, I think Hungary here is irrelevant. What is relevant is China or Russia, and they're using, of course, a Hungarian politician who's becoming deliberately more and more dependent, economically dependent.
Right, but you mentioned, pardon me for interrupting you, but you mentioned that Hungary is irrelevant. However, it does still have slight power. I mean, Hungary's decision to, for instance, withhold EU funds intended for Poland support to Ukrainian refugees, I feel like it's a significant point of contention within the EU, which might affect NATO alliance. So do you think that this holds relevance in any way?
In both cases, in case of EU support for Ukraine and the refugee support for Poland, of course, Hungary can put itself at odds. It will risk backfiring, just like it backfired now. The backfiring starts with Article 7. Hungary is risking it will sideline its any political influence in the EU. It has because of that, but also we know that Hungary has been sidelined already in the previous action when it was asked by Chancellor Scholz to step out and not to vote in key decisions it was opposing. So I don't think, again, it is a relevant country that takes any decisions to block or unblock. There are much bigger powers that dictate Hungarian policy right now and that we need to focus on.
You mentioned the irrelevance of Hungary. However, Viktor Orban has a strong mandate at home. He has recently won yet another election. And his main opponent, Peter Magyar, also is against sending military aid to Ukraine. So where does this attitude of Hungarian voters really come from? I mean, here in Poland, we say that because Russia had so much impact on Polish politics back a long time ago, Poles are very much against Russia. Why is the Hungarian public slightly pro-Russian in this regard?
Hungarian public is confused and misinformed. It is deliberately misinformed through actions that started 14 years ago with Viktor Orban taking over power, taking over the public TV, changing it into a government propaganda tube, and then slice by slice taking away independent media from the market and making them part of the conglomerate of the like-minded propaganda on behalf of the ruling party. 14 years into the game, we know, and this is being researched by, for instance, Oxford University Press, Reuters Press Institute, that much of the propaganda, much of the communication that goes in the public media, or so-called public media, but the government media, and the outlets are simply propagating the narratives of Russia. Even before Sputnik or Russia Today were banned across EU, they were not operating in Hungary because they didn't have to. The narratives of Russia are sedimented, and again, it took time, and we were not paying attention of what was going on in Hungary, while those narratives are there. By now, in the government TV, we have news channels, the main news channels, spreading the propaganda in also Russian and in Chinese through the taxpayers' money, government TV in late night shows.
Which clearly shows that, like you mentioned, that we have to look far east for the key players in that chess game. Wojciech Przybylski was our guest today. Thank you so much for providing your expert insights.